Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to today's live stream show. Today's guest is author Curtis Chin, who wrote this wonderful book. It's called Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. So thank you, Curtis, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Yeah. So do you want to give us a little bit of your personal background before we start talking about the book?
Yeah, so the memoir is called Everything I Learned. I learned in a Chinese restaurant, and it's about growing up in Detroit in the 80s. It was a very tough time for the city as a whole. Not only did you have the auto industry that was struggling, but you had crack cocaine, you had AIDS. I knew 5 people murdered by the time I was 18 years old. But despite this difficult background, my family had this really wonderful Chinese restaurant in the inner city, right in the corner of Cass and Peterborough, in the red light district, the worst part of the city. Um, and they were able to raise me and my 5 siblings and offer us a really great life. And so this book is really, it's my memoir, but it's also a thank you to my parents for all that they've given me and my siblings, but also an acknowledgement of the city of Detroit. Um, and what a wonderful, wonderful place it was to grow up.
Mhm. Yeah. And so, based on your book, it sounds like you have a great great grandfather who actually came over from China, right? Back in the
Yes.
1800s.
Yes.
Yes. And it's kind of, I guess it was a typical story where the family stayed behind. So, but was your father born in the US?
Yeah, my dad was born in Detroit.
Okay. And
Yeah.
your mother came from Hong Kong, right?
Yes, because the laws back then favored men coming over and not the women. So even on my mom's side of the family, her grandfather was also here in the U.S. He's actually buried in California. So they had this long immigration thing. The difference between the two sides of my family is that my dad's side was able to eventually save up enough money to open a laundry and then a grocery store and then a restaurant. And one of the quirks of the Chinese Exclusion Act was that if you were a merchant, right, if you were a business owner, you could actually sponsor family members over. So they were able to do that. My mom's side of the family, unfortunately, never got to that level of economic stability. So it was always just the men who were still coming over, and the women stayed behind. Um, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your mom sounds like she was a big risk taker because from what I've read, it sounds like she didn't even know your dad when she agreed to marry him.
Wow, that's interesting that you call her a risk taker.
Well, I mean, that's just like she was 17 years old, right?
Yeah,
And
my
you're,
mom was 17 years old. She had already escaped from communist China to Hong Kong. And then her parents, she had been abandoned by her parents back in China
oh,
for a little while. And then at the age of 17, she's in high school in Hong Kong. And there was trouble happening in Hong Kong at that time. I think the communist China was trying to like cause trouble, foment trouble there. And so her family was really worried about things. And so they married off all their daughters to people in North America. And so I don't think my mom felt like she had a choice. So it's interesting that you say risk taker. I
yeah.
feel more like, a woman who had very few options back then, and was forced to go to, Detroit, which at that time was already, struggling and not having a very good reputation. So it definitely wasn't something she was looking forward to.
Oh, okay. Well, how did your father get introduced to her, though?
So my dad, he was going to community college at the time, but then he had to drop out because my grandparents had moved the restaurant to a bigger location, and then they asked him to drop out of school to work full time at the restaurant. And at the same time, they also needed more help, so they sent him back to China or to Hong Kong to find a wife who could work for free in the family
Oh,
business.
so free labor. Yeah.
Free labor. And so they sent him back there. The girl that they had tried to set him up with had a secret boyfriend And so my dad didn't want to come back to America empty-handed, and so he asked a relative to to see if they knew anybody, and so that's how they connected.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, because I did wonder what your mom's parents would have thought about it, but you're saying that she was basically abandoned by her parents, or she had to leave her parents?
Yeah, that's actually the story that I oftentimes like to read when I'm, doing my book tour. It's the story about my mom's journey, escaping. Because her family had been in America making money, they were sending it back to China. So they were actually pretty well to do by that time. And when the communists were coming down, they were really targeting, well-to-do families, and so they were scared. And so, but my mom's grandmother did not want to leave because she had a nice home there, right? And she was older, and so they made the decision that my mom would stay behind with her grandmother. Um, even though she was only, I think, like 3 years old or something like that. So she was left
Okay.
in China with her grandmother, while the rest of the family escaped to Hong Kong.
Mhm. Oh, so interesting. So, yeah. So, how does your family feel about your book? Have you had any criticism from people?
Oh yeah, that's a whole podcast. That's a whole
Oh,
just
okay. That would take us like 2 hours
writing
to
about
talk
family.
about.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
writing about family is always difficult.
Mhm.
I think overall they're happy for me and excited for me, but I don't think a single one of them have read the book. So
Oh,
yeah,
oh, interesting.
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's kind of like my family. They don't watch my YouTube channel. So
Well,
sometimes I feel like, well, I'll just say whatever because nobody I know is going to really watch or care. So,
well, I think for them, it's like they don't necessarily want to relive some of these moments. They don't feel they need to. They also know that it's my perspective and it's might be different from theirs. But they're overall happy for my success. I mean, they come to my readings, when I have them in the Bay Area, because they've all moved out to the Bay Area now. But no, I don't think they feel like they need to. There's not a drive in them to read it. I do like to share this one story about writing about family, because people ask, like, how honest are you, right? And for me, I felt like I am going to be. I don't know if it's a question of honesty. It's a question of, am I writing down what I remember, right? And it's my perspective. And I was doing a lot of readings to build up support for the book, because the book came out October 17th. But in March, I was already doing readings right around the country. And I went down to Austin, Texas, and the hosts had gotten to the restaurant early, so they said, "Oh, can you come early and meet us?" And I said, "Sure." So I called the lift and I went downstairs. And as I was standing on the street corner, as I went downstairs, there was a woman standing on the street corner, and she turned around and she saw that I had this jersey that said Detroit versus everybody, and she's like, "Oh, from Detroit?" And I said, "Yeah." And we started talking, and it turned out that her mom was best friends with my grandmother. You know,
oh, what?
yeah,
That's such a
and,
weird,
um,
yeah,
and if you've read the book, you'll know that my grandmother's kind of the villain. I mean, she starts off
yeah,
by calling me
kind of
Mobile.
mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
useless, right? I mean, and so, but during that interaction with that woman, she was like, "Oh, your grandmother was the nicest person ever. She always had candy in her pocket. She taught me how to drink American coffee." Like, she was really trying to convince me that my grandmother was a nice person, and I was like,
Oh,
"Yeah, that's not the person I knew." Um,
oh,
at the same time, I didn't want to necessarily convince her to switch over to my opinion, right? Because I'm glad
yeah,
somebody liked my grandmother. I wouldn't want my
yeah.
grandmother to go through life being unloved. It just wasn't coming from me because of our relationship. And so, when my car arrived, I quickly got in and I left. And then a couple of days later, I realized that that was probably my grandmother sending an emissary from the grave, telling me that I'd written her wrong. And
Oh, that
so,
she was a good lady. That is so interesting. So was this person Chinese or
yeah, she's
Chinese
Chinese.
American?
Yeah,
Huh?
she had just moved to Austin, Texas 2, 3 months ago, because her
Oh,
husband had passed away, and she moved down there to be with her daughter. And so all these little things, it's like You know what I mean? Like if I hadn't gone down 15 minutes early, if she hadn't gone on her morning walk at that time, because she said it wasn't her normal time, if I hadn't been wearing that jersey that said,
Wearing, yeah,
I mean, all these little things that tell me, like, well, it was fate that this woman would be there standing on that street corner as I'm about
yeah.
to talk about my book to say, wait a second, not so fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just when your book says all these things about your grandmother, then she has
Yeah.
some story to tell. How interesting. Wow.
Well,
Well, yeah. So this viewer would like to know, can she find it on Audible?
yes, it's on Audible. Actually, Apple Books named it one of the 20 best audiobooks last year. So it's
Awesome.
yeah, which is really weird to me because I'm not a trained actor, and there was even some thought as to maybe hiring an actor to do this. Um, but I actually haven't listened to it myself yet. But from what people say, they say I did a good job and that I have a likable voice.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
you sound good. As someone who constantly has voice struggles and people are always criticizing me, yeah, you
Oh,
sound
really?
good. So
Oh, okay.
yeah. Well, I am going to see another specialist soon. So yeah, so interesting. Well, should I ask you some random questions about your book since I've kind of read chunks and pieces of it?
Sure.
Okay. Well, first thing, like I really enjoyed it, and I'm still enjoying this book so far. And I'm not just saying that to
Thank
help
you.
you sell books, guys. This is a really great, touching story. It's really funny. So I like I like the funny parts and the references to pop culture and stuff. But there's like a time where you said you guys moved to the suburbs once your family got better off. And then there was that Time News article about Asian American whiz kids. And I was like, oh my gosh, I totally remember that from the 80s because I was at the Chinese Community Center in Atlanta. And some of the parents had that magazine and were trying to use it to inspire us kids. And then there was like a parade focus on this local guy named Bobby Wu,
Hmm.
who is a lawyer now, but he went to Harvard.
Yeah.
So we were all proud of it, and all the parents would talk about that stuff and expect the kids to be model minorities and valedictorian, math team champion. So yeah, but you did kind of fulfill that, didn't you? It sounded like you did. You
So.
did very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so funny. I was actually at a friend's house the other day, and there were six of us there, and we're all Asian American, right? And four of them had been class valedictorian, and one of them was
Oh,
salutatorian, and I was the only one that wasn't like in the top 30 in my class. Like, so okay, well, I guess and they were
no.
now like I'm the only one that actually got a book. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
maybe in the long run, but yeah. But one thing I do want to say about the book is that I really did try to connect the book not just to my hometown of Detroit, but also to that time period of the 80s. I think that a lot of times when you read specifically Asian American memoirs, you don't really hear too much about the experiences in the Midwest, right? And you don't
Mhm.
really hear as much about the working class families. And so those were very important to me. And then also, just the 80s, being an 80s kid, I really tried to, look at how America was changing at that time, right? Because I do think that, oh, and okay, so spoiler alert is that during that time period in my life, I was actually a young Republican because one of the accusations against or stereotypes against Asians is that we're not very loyal. So I was like, okay, we're in this white suburb. I'm going to be the most patriotic American possible.
Yeah. You're like red, white, and blue all the
Yeah, I
way,
was
like
class
Alex P.
president,
Keaton.
president of the National Honor Society. I co-founded Students Against Smoking and the Young Republican Club. I went to Boys State. I was like a total terror, you know. But I think my experiences being part of the Republican Party back then and seeing the changes within that organization really you can sort of see the seeds of it, because it was really Ronald Reagan who first said, "Make America Great Again." He literally said that. I mean, Donald
Oh,
Trump just sort of borrowed that from him.
oh.
The appeal to these white working class voters in Michigan, which they called the Reagan Democrats, again, is just the playbook that Trump is borrowing. And so I felt like, the things that I learned, in terms of my evolution too, in terms of my understanding of politics in America, um, I think is fascinating to me, and how you make that connection. Because at the end of the day, um, you know, I wanted to write my memoir, but I also wanted to write a story that, in some ways, can maybe bring our country back together a little bit in a small way. I feel like we have such deep divisions in our country right now, but maybe a book that sort of looks at all these things from a very intersectional lens might be able to, open up a conversation, to some of these deep issues that we're having.
Mhm. Yeah, and it starts with people telling their stories, which is what is so great about this book, because you're willing to bare yourself, talk about your family dynamics, your whole family history, problems, to try to get people to understand the struggles. Um, okay, so this is a totally random question, but you were talking about how you were a middle child and you felt like you weren't special. And you mentioned one of your brothers getting a bumpy cake for his birthday or something. What's a Sandy's bumpy cake or something?
Yeah,
What's that? What's a whatever that was, Sandy's or Skippy's bumpy cake?
it's a total Detroit thing. There's so many Detroit things in there.
Oh.
But Sanders bumpy cake, but it's like they would make this frosting, right? But they would put these ridges on the top, and so on the inside they would, put in extra sweet stuff like marshmallow filling or some, fondant or something. You know what I mean? Like to give it that extra sweetness.
Oh, okay. So that was some sort of gourmet local cake that your brother got.
Well, if you consider a $5.99 cake gourmet, then yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you didn't get one because in your book it sounded like you were kind of resentful that you weren't the favorite kid and you didn't get that bumpy cake. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I was resentful, but I think I pivoted very quickly, because I was sort of like, well, if people are going to ignore me, then at least I can do my own thing. Like I didn't stew in that resentment. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe if I
Mhm,
did, I sublimated it really low, because then it forced me to channel into my own things, right? And then in some
mhm,
ways, also being a gay kid, not having the focus uh, shown on me, but actually gave me freedom, right? Because I was not the one people were talking about. I was not the one being held up, and being scrutinized like the way my brother was. So
mhm,
in some ways, it worked to my advantage, I think.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was reading also the part about your coming out, and it did sound like your parents or your siblings didn't really even bat an eye. Like it sounded like they're like, yeah, okay, good. So is that kind of an accurate description of it?
Spoiler alert, but I actually don't come out to my family in the book.
Oh, okay. I thought there was. I swear I just read it before we went live, where you're
Maybe it was
talking
something else
about.
you
No,
read.
no, you're talking about there was a guy named Matt at the restaurant or
Oh, my
someplace where.
brother.
Huh?
Oh, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, my brother, but I didn't come out to him, at that time. But there was an interaction there where I think he maybe
Mhm,
might have suspected or whatever, but no.
mhm,
Um, and people have asked me about that, like in terms of, the coming out memoir really oftentimes is about like all the other people you come out to in your life. But to me, as a gay person, I think that coming out is a process that you do throughout your whole life. Even at the age of 55, I'm still coming out, right? So it doesn't
mhm,
really matter the individuals, that I come out to in the book. The most important is really the most important person to come out to is really yourself, that acceptance. And so really, to me, a coming out memoir is really about not who you tell, but how you feel about yourself, right? That acceptance, that love that you give yourself. So that's why I didn't feel it was necessary. I mean, I also didn't work in the time
mhm,
frame that I wanted to cover, because with memoirs you have to choose a segment of your life, And for me, I think where I ended it was the perfect place. It provided a perfect arc. It provided a perfect mirror from the first scene in the book, and it follows the themes. And so let me, I will read just the first paragraph,
Sure.
intro. So
Okay.
for people, uh, everything I learned in a Chinese restaurant is structured in 3 sections of 8 stories each, 888, which is good luck to Chinese people, 8 stories in elementary, middle school, 8 in high school, and 8 in college. But I start off the prologue talking about my family's journey to Michigan because I don't think you can know a person's story unless you know their family story, and B, because as I mentioned before, you don't get to hear too many stories about Asians in the Midwest, and so I really felt like that's how I want to start the book. So the book starts off, um, welcome to Chung's. Is this for here to go? Armed with a smile and a red waiter's jacket with a perpetual plum sauce stain. That's how my dad greeted any new face who entered the lobby of our popular Chinese restaurant in Detroit. Interestingly, my great great grandpa, Gong Li Chin, had faced the same question in the late 1800s as he stood cold and alone on a rickety dock in Guangzhou, China, trying to decide his future and that of his young impoverished family. For here or to go? For here or to go, as I got older, it was a question I asked myself. Starting in our restaurant's long and open back kitchen, where my family made some of our most popular items, including the tangiest barbecue pork, the best smelling almond cookies, my mom taught me my first lessons. Before diving into math, English, and geography, she began with a little American history, tales of elders and ancestors, our family as prologue. And so that is the fundamental theme of the book, is like, for here to go, do I stay with my family in this beautiful, wonderful restaurant where I got to eat all the free food I wanted, but at the same time the city is literally falling down around me, burning down, like people being killed, and then struggling with my sexuality, and that's the through line for the whole book. And I think it's a relatable one because I think we all have these questions in our life, right? Like, when's it time for us to, like, break free, from our nest, our friends, our family, and decide to be that person on our own. So yeah, that's how I start the book.
Yeah, great. Well, I did find that passage that I think gave me the wrong impression.
Mm,
Page 230.
mm.
So it sounds like more like you were talking about your siblings. Chris had responded with, "Did you tell mom and dad? What did they say?" But that was the point. They hadn't said a freaking thing. The tension was awkward. I finally had to confront them in the main kitchen at work. Their response was, "Oh."
Mm.
It was a total case of don't ask, don't tell, don't even look. Yeah. So I guess this was when you
Page
were a college student.
32? Page
Huh?
232?
Yeah, 230.
230. No, I wanted to. And so I had gone and I was being very passive aggressive. I didn't come out to them, but what I did was I got my ears pierced, hoping that
Oh,
they
yes.
would interpret that it was coming out. But, so no, it just had to do with getting my ears pierced. I didn't actually come out to them.
Oh,
It was just
okay.
a passive aggressive way of coming out, you know.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
But later, was there a time that you did talk to your parents
Not in this,
about not in the book?
not in this book.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so it sounded like your father has passed away, right? But your mom is still alive.
Yeah, my parents were sadly in a car accident in 2005 and on the way to work, and my dad passed away, and then my mom was
Oh,
severely injured. Yeah, and so
oh,
if
right.
anything, that would be book two. Because I was working as a TV writer at the time here in Hollywood, and I had to leave the show that I was working on to fly back home. Um, and yeah, that was a difficult time period, and so I was the one who had to sell the family business. I had to sell the family restaurant. So
Oh, I
mhm.
see. So is anybody still in Detroit?
No, sure. Someone said they were leaving. Oh, just to let you know, if you have viewers here in North Carolina, I mean, part of the reason
Yes.
we're doing this is I'm actually going to be in North Carolina at the end of this month. I'm going to be at Winston-Salem for the Movable Feast Book Festival, but then I'm also going to be at the UNC and Duke.
Yes.
And then I'm trying to find a location in Charlotte for January 30th. If anybody has any contacts in Charlotte, please let me know. I don't know if it's maybe getting too late to organize something, but yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Oh, well, I think most of the viewers here are from all over the whole country as well as Canada. So I
oh,
don't think,
okay.
yeah, most of my viewers are not local. That's what's great
Oh,
about YouTube.
okay.
Yeah.
So if they want my schedules, I'm at curtisfromdetroit.com. I've added the ones that I've confirmed, but there's others in the work. But I'm going to be all over. Michigan, Missouri, Hawaii, New York, Boston. So yeah, hopefully see some of your friends on the road. But anyway, back to the book. Um, yeah, so the coming out thing, my parents passing away, that would be a book too, because that all happened in my 20s. This book ends after I graduate college, because
Mhm.
I wanted to bookend that opening image of my great great grandfather standing on the dock in China with me standing on the platform in Detroit at the train station as I'm just as he was making the decision to leave his ancestral homeland, I was making the same decision to leave my ancestral homeland of Detroit. I don't think
Mhm.
that's spoiler alert because I don't live there anymore, so you kind of know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I ultimately make the decision that I do have to leave Michigan in order to find my way in the world. So.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So after college in Michigan, you went to New York City, right?
Yes, that none of this is in the book. None,
Yes.
yeah. The last image is me standing on the dock. I mean, standing on the train platform because Detroit at that time had just closed the old Michigan Central Station. Which, if you have anybody in here from Detroit, you'll know that recently it's been renovated. And it's a gleaming building again, but it sat dormant for 20, 30 years.
Do any of your siblings still live around there?
No, everybody lives in the Bay Area now. My great
Really?
grandmother,
Oh.
and some other extended family members still live there. She's not my biological great grandmother. She's my great grandfather's third wife. And then those aunts and uncles are still there. But no, pretty much so many people have left. I mean, it's Detroit. I mean, it was
Yeah.
a city that went from 1.8 million people to a few hundred thousand now. I mean, it's really cleared out.
Let's see. Yeah, you mentioned that by the time you were 18, you knew five people who had passed away. Are you able to tell us more details? I know one of them was Vincent Chin.
Yeah, no, I mean, so Vincent Chin, for people who don't know, he was this Chinese American who was murdered in a hate crime. You know, uh, this was during the early 80s. That was right before I was entering my high school year. And he was a family friend of ours. My uncle was his best man. And so it was a case that really impacted me growing up. He was out celebrating his upcoming wedding. He goes to this bar. These two white auto workers come in and they're overheard saying, "It's because you motherfuckers that were out of work." They get kicked out. And then these guys get in their car and they drive around until they find Vincent sitting outside of McDonald's waiting for his ride to pick him up. And then they take a baseball bat out of their car and they bash his head in and they kill him. And, we found out the very next morning because, we're friends. And it was just amazing to me. It really was my political awakening because just to follow the media, to follow the community, and all that stuff as a 14-year-old, um, was just shocking. But my senior year in high school, I was by that time I had graduated to being a waiter at our restaurant, and one of our customers. Regular customers came in all the time at strange hours, told us he was an ER doctor. Turned out he was actually a famous psychiatrist who was coming to the area to hire the prostitutes. And he was trying to break off with this one girl who he had spent over $100,000 back then. That's a lot of money back then.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, and the pimp got so upset that he actually also took a baseball bat, bashed in his head, killed him, and then chopped up his body with a Ginsu knife, and then littered it all the way across the Upper Peninsula, up to the
Oh,
Upper Peninsula in Michigan. That
oh,
that killing also became famous because there's a book called Masquerade about that, and I think actor James Wood had for many years tried to turn that into a movie, but so that's basically my high school bookends. I mean, so you know,
wow. How
yeah,
sad. That's
it's
terrible.
well,
Yeah. Well, yeah, Helen, who is one of the frequent viewers on this channel, thank you so much, Helen. She wanted to know how I know you or found out about your book. So the background is that Curtis is actually famous within Asian American circles. So a long time ago, when I was all into Asian American activism and stuff at UC Berkeley, I already started hearing about you. I don't know, probably through like the social culture Asian American news groups or whatever, because he was a co-founder of the Asian American Writers Workshop in New York. So, but I didn't actually meet you in person until what 2012 during all the Vincent Chin what would you call it, commemoration
yeah.
events.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is in the book, but yeah, I mean, part of the reason that I left Michigan was that I felt like I needed to find a writing community, right? The more diverse one, because I went to the University of Michigan. Go Blue! Good luck this Monday. Um, and I just wanted to find a literary community, so I went off to New York, and one of the first things I did was I co-founded this group called the Asian American Writers Workshop, which is still around today and really doing great stuff. But that experience as being a co-founder and also the organization's first executive director, um, when I was like, what, 24, 25, I mean, really gave me incredible exposure, as a young person, as a young activist, as a young community organizer. And so that was really, really wonderful.
Yeah. So, so were you the person who spearheaded that whole Vincent Chin commemoration efforts back in 2012?
Yeah, because part of it is that so when my parents were in that car accident in 2005, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I was back home in Michigan for about 6 months because it took a long time to settle everything, like fix up the house to sell the restaurant. I mean, all this kind of stuff. And it was then that I thought, like, do I really want to go back to LA or do I want to find something else to do with my life? And I thought back to my dad and what he might want me to do. And because, Vincent was his friend, and because, um, my dad was very aware of political issues and things like that. Um, I thought back to the Vincent Chin case as something that I thought he might want me to do. And so I decided to make a documentary. So at that point, I pivoted my career to go from doing comedy writing to social justice documentaries. And so, yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was the original?
No, I was just wondering about your whole effort back in 2012 to
Oh, yeah,
make
yeah, yeah.
sure
So
people knew
that's why the
about that.
case. Yeah, yeah. So I did that with a group that I was on the board of, a progressive Asian American group called APAP. But then also just through the connections, because the book, I mean, the film I made was called Vincent Who, and it really looked at the development of an Asian American political consciousness after the Vincent Chin case. And I had no idea what I was doing making that film because I'd had no experience. I didn't go to film school, but the story touched a nerve with so many people in the Asian American community that people came out of the woodwork offering their help. I had this one guy in San Francisco say, "Oh, I heard you're making this film. I'm going to do everything I can to do to help you. I'll raise all the money for you." I was like, "Great, be my
Whoa,
guest," and he
really?
did. Yeah, and one of the groups that he raised the money from was OCA,
Yes.
uh, which is a great civil rights organization in the community. They asked me to preview the film at their student conference before it was even done. And from that, I had like 15, 20 schools inviting me to come out to speak. And eventually, I ended up touring that film to, I think, over 600 schools in like
Whoa,
15
that's
countries.
crazy. That's
Yeah, no, no, no.
wonderful.
I mean, even the government in Norway flew me out there to screen the film.
Oh,
Yeah, Amnesty International in London, Japan. I did a few
Mhm.
screenings there, and in Seoul. I mean, it just really, and also with the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes recently, post-COVID or during COVID, I've gotten a resurgence of invitations. Like even just this upcoming next week, I'm going out to Andover, Phillips Andover Academy in
Yes.
Boston, and a couple other schools to do screenings for MLK Day. So. I think that my perspective as someone who grew up in Detroit, someone who's from the Chinatown community, is something that people are interested in vis-a-vis the Vincent Chin case, right?
Mhm.
The actual personal side of it, even though I wasn't friends with Vincent because he was older than me, I definitely could see how his, death impacted our tight-knit Chinese American, or specifically Cantonese American, Cantonese speaking community, working class community of Chinatown. And so I think that's a perspective people are interested in. And so I'm happy to share that with people.
Mhm. Yeah, especially since a lot of younger people don't even know about this case. It was from 1982. So, and younger now means like what, under 35, under 40, as we get older, it's like, oh, wow, these people don't know the 80s. So that was another reason why I really enjoyed this book, because you have a lot of 80s references to it that I recall. So that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
But getting back to the Vincent Chin documentary, how can people see it?
I put that online for free on my website, curtisfromdetroit.com. So you can go there. Or if you're with a school, you can check it out on Canopy, the service that a lot of universities use.
Okay. And you said you don't have a background in filmmaking, right?
No, my background's in poetry writing. I studied
Yeah.
poetry in college. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So how did you even learn how to do anything, like besides getting a camera?
Well, I mean, at the end of the well, I mean, I had to hire people who know all the technical stuff, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, it's all about storytelling, isn't it? And I
Yes.
think anybody that wants to enter the creative fields, I highly advise that they take a poetry writing class, because poetry is the fundamental building block of language, of communications. I mean, for me, you know, sorry, these little messages keep popping up.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, no, everything you learn about language from listening, right? From developing a scene, of word choice, of language. It's just beautiful. And sometimes people will say, like, "Well, you seem to have a career that's like hopped all over the place, right?" And I say, I don't really think so. It's always been about like the narrative, right? It's always about storytelling. It's just the formats might have been different. And in some ways, I do think that my memoir is kind of a culmination of all of it, actually. It's like it includes the poetry, right? Because hopefully I wrote it in a very poetic style, a very easy to read style. Comedy is from the TV stuff I did. Hopefully it's funny, although the Washington Post did say that it was cheesy humor. So I don't know about that.
What?
um, and
No, it's
uh,
funny.
yeah, I hope so.
I love it. I love it.
Okay,
I'm
good.
not even done reading it, but I was like, haha, that's funny. Haha.
Okay, good, 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 good.
Yeah.
And the social justice stuff in the book is really from the films I make. So in some ways, the memoir that I've written is a synthesis of all these different genres that I've worked in. And so yeah, that's why I'm
Mhm,
particularly proud of it, because it really does represent all these different stages of my life too.
mhm. Yeah. Well, you did mention you've done some comedy writing.
Mm.
Like for what kind of shows?
I worked on a couple sitcoms for the networks, and some shows for Disney Channel, young adult type stuff, and pilots. Um,
Oh,
I've also
interesting.
worked with PBS to develop kids shows. So
Oh, that sounds so interesting. Are you able to tell us the names of
um,
those shows?
no,
No,
I can, but
your secret?
a long time ago. It's so fun. It's fine. I'm really
Oh,
here
okay.
to talk about the book. Because
Okay, okay,
for me,
cool.
it's always
Well,
like, what's the latest project?
yeah, yeah. Well, let me think. So there was something in your book where you talked about your family sponsoring a family of Vietnamese refugees. Can you tell us more about that?
So, it's just a random thing. I mean, just that
Yeah,
it
it
just
was like one sentence, I think.
yeah, it just showed that my dad was a really nice guy, and he just opened our door to everything, because I think that, so that's one thing that I do like to say. People often ask me, what is the, given the title of your book, Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant, what's the single most important thing that you learned in that Chinese restaurant? And I like to say that it's actually the first lesson that I learned from my parents, in particular my dad, is that when you're a young person, oftentimes your parents will say, don't talk to strangers. My parents gave me the exact opposite, advice. They said talk to strangers. And who they were talking about were the people sitting in our dining room. Because as we mentioned, my mom didn't graduate from high school, right? She didn't have an opportunity. My dad dropped out of community college after a couple semesters. They didn't really know what economic opportunities existed for us outside the four walls of that Chinese restaurant, but they knew that they had the dining room of people who did. And so anytime my dad met somebody who had like an interesting story, or like just seemed really happy in life, he'd call all six of us kids to run over and start barraging these people with questions of like, what do you do for a living? How did you get your job? How much money do you make? And so
What? That's funny.
just this spirit of like, you know, getting to know people that are different from you, not being afraid of asking questions and not being afraid of asking for help when needed. I mean, these are all like really fundamental things that I've carried with me in my life. And I really thank my parents for that. And I thank the Chinese restaurant for that, because when you grow up as a kid working in food service, right? You really have to listen, you have to learn, right? You have to, it teaches you all these really valuable skills.
Yeah, I can kind of see it in your personality that you're not shy. You're like the type of person that could just like talk to anybody
Yeah.
and just be gregarious and friendly.
Well, I always say that even though I don't work in a Chinese restaurant anymore, I still think I'm a Chinese waiter. I go through life asking people, how can I help you? What can I
Oh,
do for you? Like, how can I make your
like,
life
oh,
better?
yes, yes, I'll do that right away.
Yeah, I
Or
do that.
thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's why I also enjoyed that story about your meeting with Yul Brynner, because it sounds like he
Yeah.
was actually rude to you guys, but your father still had to just smile and be like, "Okay, thank you for coming, and pleasure meeting you and stuff." Yeah, but I do recall watching some interview a long time ago with Yul Brynner's son, and he did say his father was part Chinese, so he was part Asian. That's what
No.
I heard. So,
He is from Russia, but his family's from the eastern side of Russia. But he did live in China, because and I did some research on it, because in later in life is that he did live in China because after his parents got divorced, his mom wanted to just escape Paris, because I think they were living in Paris at the time, and then
oh,
moved to China, and they lived there for a couple of years, and then the war was happening, and then they left. You know what I mean? So he does have
oh,
a Chinese connection in that sense, and so I think he
mhm.
does speak Chinese, but he's not ethnically Chinese, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, hard to,
No,
yeah.
he's
Bottom line
Romanian.
is,
He's
huh?
he's Romani. He's and Russian. There's
Oh,
it's in it, but that's where you get some of these. And maybe some people say that the Romanis, came from Asia, from the Mongols,
mhm.
many many hundreds of years ago, right?
Yeah,
So maybe that's why he maybe looks a little what you
yeah.
might say typically Asian, right?
Uh-huh.
But I think that's where he gets it from. It's not. He's not ethnically Chinese.
Or easily traced to China or something. Well, bottom line is he was rude to you guys. So I'm sorry. But that was a really
Yeah,
interesting
there are
story about,
lots of cameos in the book, like of a
yeah.
celebrity of customers, not just the famous ones like Yul Brynner or Mayor Coleman Young, the first Black mayor of Detroit, but also just our everyday customers, right? Like the drag queens and the prostitutes, and the Jewish customers. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
free of everybody, because that's what Chinese restaurants are, right? I mean, it's like I like to say, it's one of the few places where you can go in and meet people from a different background, class,
Mhm,
race, religion, whatever. And
mhm.
so I tried to include that all in the book.
Yeah. Did any of your siblings wind up um doing something in the restaurant industry?
No, so we closed the restaurant after my dad passed away, and the building where the location where I worked at growing up has remained dormant for the past 20 odd years. And suddenly, Detroit's gentrifying right now, and it's finally hit the area that the restaurant was. And so recently, the building was sold, and the new owner actually contacted me. They went through all the trouble of tracking me down in Los Angeles and asking me to come back and reopen the
Oh,
restaurant.
what?
That's how
Oh,
that's how legendary our family's restaurant was in Detroit, that even after 20 years, that people would go through the trouble of trying to track me down to reopen it. I mean, it was an
yeah.
amazing, amazing restaurant founded by my great-grandfather in 1940. I mean, and so, yeah, and so when he asked me if I would come back and reopen the restaurant, I think, like, for about 5 seconds, I thought, like, "Yeah, I could do this." But then I
Mhm.
thought, "Well, no, I'm on a book tour. There's no way I can go back." So I do harbor fantasies of going back into the restaurant business at some point, but I don't know if that will ever be, something that will be a dream that will be fulfilled, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally different. BB here says you probably have some good recipes. Write a recipe book with stories. Do you think you would do
Oh my
that?
god, so many people have asked me for my recipes. Can't do that. Yeah. I usually start off when I go to book readings, I usually start off by asking people to guess how many egg rolls my family sold, in those 65 years that we owned the restaurant.
Mhm.
Can you
Yeah.
guess how many egg rolls we sold?
I have no idea. I don't know, like 5 million?
We sold over 10 million egg rolls.
Oh,
That's how
wow.
popular the restaurant was. That's why people
Yeah,
still remember it. I
yeah.
still test for it, all the time.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
no, it's so funny though because I'm not really one of the jokes in the book is that everybody in my family could cook except for me. I was the worst person. Like I was always like burning things, whatever. And there's a journey of in the book about like me and my learning how to cook. But one of the lessons I did learn from that experience, right? Another lesson I learned is that we all have our place in the world. As much as I wanted to be in the kitchen with everybody else cooking, every time they got together to make a big meal, I was sent into the dining room to go set the table. And I was really frustrated. And I hated that at first. But then I realized that, well, maybe this is where I need to be. Maybe this is what I can do. And that's why I really put in all my efforts to be the best waiter I could, the best people person, the best, do you know what I mean? Food service person.
Yeah.
And so I think that
Mhm.
was a lesson in life too, is that maybe we're not always meant to be the places where we want to be, but we're in the places that we need to be, and we learn these things. You know, um, and so yeah, no, it was just a really fantastic experience growing up, and I would love to figure out how to do that at some point, but I just don't know if it's ever going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you in the Bay Area now? Or
No, I
uh,
live in Los Angeles. I mean, I
okay, that's
technically
what I
live out
thought.
of my suitcase, but yeah, I
Oh,
live in LA.
yeah, that is just so amazing that you've been able to travel to so many places and people are so interested in hearing these things. So that's really great. I mean, I would say like 30, 40 years ago, you wouldn't hear about something like this where some Asian American author goes to hundreds of different, book readings and events. Back then there was just like Amy Tan and
Yeah, no,
maybe a
I
few,
mean,
few
I've been
authors.
very I've been very, very lucky. I mean, CBS Saturday Morning News did an 8-minute segment on me. So if you guys want to look that up, that was great. NBC News filmed one, which hasn't aired yet, but I know it's coming up. NPR did a really nice segment interview with me. There's a couple other national networks which I'm, scheduled to go visit this month, but I can't tell you which ones. But all that. I mean, the press has just been incredible. Also, just like the food stuff, like because again, in the book, there's a joke that I don't know how to cook. But since then, I wrote an article, essay for Bon Appetit magazine that was selected for best American food writing last year. I did a piece for America's Test Kitchen, the food show. I produced an episode of their podcast. So
Oh, great.
yeah, so I've been doing a lot of stuff in the food space lately too. So
Mhm.
I've had these really wonderful opportunities, and I'm going to name drop here for a second. But
Sure.
so I did a lot of work for Obama during his first presidential run, and because of that, I got added to the guest list, for their different stuff over at the White House. And so the first time I was invited there, and there was a big celebration. It was for the Gay Pride Month, and I was just standing there with all these really powerful people, including the president and the first lady, thinking, I'm a kid from the inner city of Detroit, right? And here I am standing in the fucking White House. I mean, that's why I love America so much, why I think it's such a great country. I mean, obviously there are problems with our country, but it's why I'm such a, you know what I mean? I have such a deep love. you know, for
Yeah, it's
America.
a land of mobility and opportunity.
Well, I mean, there's a line. The one line that a lot of people say they quote from my book so far is that, has to do with that. It's like right after the Vincent Chin case, and I was questioning how much, I trusted the American justice system anymore. And I put in a line in there that says, you know, uh, let me see if I can quickly look it up. Because I hate. Sorry, if you want to ramble for a second.
Oh, sure. Well, hope you guys all take a look at Curtis's new book. It's his memoir, Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. And oh, look at these nice little reviews. I know some of these people, like
Okay.
Jeff Chang, Jeff Yang. Yes,
Mm.
yeah. Because didn't Jeff Chang go to UC Berkeley? I think I sort of knew him at Berkeley, but he was older. Jeff Yang, I've known him a long time from back in the days when he was the founder of a magazine.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
stayed friends since then. You know. Can't seem to find the line, but I'm going to just pair. Oh wait, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was basically, yes, my family succeeded because of America, but America also succeeded because of my family. And it's just this relationship between that we have with our immigrants is that, yes, we give opportunities to people that come into this country, but this country wouldn't be as great as it is unless we had that energy, right? Because if you look at other countries that don't have a strong immigration policy, right, or is you see that they reach a certain point where they start to decline, right? That's just historically the way it happens. But it's immigration that then drives, that brings in that new energy, that new ideas, and oftentimes even just population, right? Because there is a population decline amongst those countries that don't offer immigration, and so it is essential for our country to always have that if we want to maintain our competitiveness, right? That's what we need to do. We need to, make sure that we have a solid immigration policy that allows us to open the doors.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, this person, hey, misdemeanor, says, sorry to let you know, U.S. is declining rapidly despite immigrants. My parents are immigrants. Well, I mean, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think that definitely America has these challenges that we're going through right now, but I'm an eternal optimist, and I feel like maybe some of the pushback that we are getting in terms of the diversity that we're receiving is, yeah. I mean, some people are very threatened by it, but I do think at the end of the day, it is for the benefit of our country, and that we're going to get over some of these issues. I mean, these are struggles that we've been going on. I do also think that maybe we of a certain generation, who grew up in the 80s and 90s, maybe had it a little more privileged than previous generations. Because if you talk to people that are older than us, I mean, some of the struggles that we're going through now are the ones that they went through themselves, right? I mean, the difficult times in our country's past. In some ways, we benefited from not just the policies of the New Deal, but also the civil rights struggles, the successes that were achieved in those decades allowed us to have this illusion that, hey, that we're always going to be moving forward to this. But maybe that's not really 100% true, right? Like you have to be vigilant about uh, keeping the pressure to keep making progress. I think so.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's no doubt that our country is having difficulties. It really makes me sad that we can't even have civil conversations with each other. But I am an eternal optimist, and hopefully we can get past these things.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your stories. So hopefully I'll be able to make it to one of your book readings, probably the one at a bookstore in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, it's
I
going to be an
can't
epilogue
remember.
bookstore. Uh,
Apple.
yeah,
Okay.
I believe
Yeah.
that's right on their campus, right? I don't.
Is that the one that used to be a different name, like on Franklin Street?
It is on. I believe it's on Franklin because it's
Yeah.
by but the university organized it, so I'm not sure. But
Oh,
they seem,
okay.
but
Oh,
they did
yeah, yeah.
on
I
Franklin
know where
Street.
it is.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, hopefully I'll see you there then. It'll be great to see you, but I'm sure you're going to be totally swamped by all the people and everything. So, Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I've had good crowds at things, like averaging about 50, 60 people. But,
Yeah.
I don't know. We're getting into a new year and, so we'll see. But yeah, if you could help spread the word and get your friends, that'd be really, really wonderful.
Yeah, I would like to, but like I told you, I'm
Yeah.
getting old. So most of my friends, like we all just stay home when it gets dark. We're not going out to UNC Chapel Hill for some book reading. But I'll definitely tell some of my friends that live closer to Chapel Hill. Like my cousin used to be the president of NAP, so he lives in Chapel Hill. So hopefully he'll get out there with his daughter or something.
Well,
Yeah.
if there is still an active chapter, I know you said that it's not as active as
And yeah, it's pretty much
is there.
just like a
Was it
dead group.
AHA chapter or other? Anyway, yeah, we can talk
Yeah.
about it. Please send me any contacts or forward it, if you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Curtis. I appreciate your time. So thanks everybody for joining in.
Great. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
have a good weekend. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.